is Election Day, and one Republican gubernatorial candidate is making his way across West Virginia today to speak with voters. Attorney General Patrick Morrisey is running for governor of West Virginia this election. This morning, he stopped at Cheryl's Country Diner in Parkersburg for his Keep the Faith campaign tour. The tour provides the opportunity for West Virginians to hear from Morrisey himself about his vision for the state.
I think a lot of people are very worried about the economy and the inflation that we've seen, record-breaking inflation from Kamala Harris and Joe Biden, and you need to get President Trump back in office. I think that's so critical for the state of West Virginia and for our whole country. Also, people are very worried about the volume of illicit drugs that are flowing into our state, and we have just so much deadly fentanyl that comes from China, that goes through Mexico, gets packaged by the cartels. It makes its way right here to West Virginia. I want to work with President Trump to stop all that.
Morrisey will be making stops in Wheeling, Morgantown, and other parts of the state to end the day in the Eastern Panhandle. He encourages everyone to get out and vote tomorrow.